All right, let's dive into one of the most unsettling and frankly powerful stories ever written, Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis. It's a story that asks a question so deeply uncomfortable it has stuck with readers for over a century. And that question is really at the heart of what we're talking about today. What happens when you're no longer useful? It's a fear that can touch every part of our lives, our jobs, our families, even our own sense of who we are. So, where does this story even begin? Well, it kicks off with something that is just as bizarre as it is sudden. There's no buildup, no warning, just this monstrous change that gets the whole thing started. Let's meet our protagonist, Gregor Samsa. Now, this guy is a totally ordinary, dedicated traveling salesman. He's just living his life until one morning he wakes up and finds he's turned into a giant insect-like creature. Seriously, no reason given, no explanation. It just happens. And this is where the real horror of the story kicks in. See, while Gregor's body is completely alien, a hard armored back, all these little legs waving around, his mind, his consciousness is still 100% human. He's sitting there worrying about being late for work, thinking about his family's money problems, all while he's trapped in this monstrous new form. That right there, that's the source of his profound, awful isolation. So this completely surreal transformation, it basically works like a magnifying glass. It starts to expose the systems that were already running Gregor's life. And the very first thing we see is the cold, dehumanizing nature of his job. Think about it. What was his life actually like before he became a bug? It was just a total grind. We're talking long, grueling hours, constant, exhausting travel, and a super demanding boss. He was valued for one thing and one thing only, the money he brought in. So when he suddenly can't work, it's not seen as some terrible tragedy for him. It's seen as him being lazy, a failure. And this just perfectly captures the story's really sharp critique of modern labor, right? It points to this shift toward productivity at the expense of human connection. To his boss, Gregor wasn't really a person. He was a piece of equipment, an asset. His only value was what he could produce. And here's the most absurd part. Even after turning into a giant insect, what are Gregor's first thoughts? His job. It's wild, but it just goes to show you how deeply that work-first identity was drilled into him. His own survival is basically an afterthought compared to his professional duties. But it's not just his work life that gets shattered. His transformation also pulls back the curtain on the very fragile and, as it turns out, conditional role he played inside his own family. Just look at how this all goes downhill. I mean, at first the family is completely dependent on his income, and you see a little bit of care, especially from his sister Great. But as time goes on, that care just sours. It turns into resentment, then horror, and finally just disgust. He goes from being the family provider to a shameful secret locked in a room. And this leads to this sort of unspoken rule in the house. He had to stay hidden. His very existence became a source of shame, not to mention a financial problem. He wasn't really Gregor, their son and brother anymore. He was just the thing in the room that had to be dealt with. With that kind of alienation, there's really only one way this can end, and that's the story's incredibly bleak conclusion, where Gregor is basically thrown away and forgotten. Ultimately, Kafka is digging into some really heavy psychological stuff here. You've got that terrifying split between your mind and your body, the loss of your identity when your role in society is stripped away, and of course, the cold, hard reality of social indifference. So when he finally dies, it's not some big family tragedy, not even close. In what has to be one of the bleakest endings ever, his death comes as a relief to his family. They're finally free from the burden he had become. And this really drives home the story's most brutal point: the ease with which an individual can be discarded when they no longer serve a functional purpose in society. As soon as Gregor stopped being useful, his humanity, at least in their eyes, just vanished. Which, of course, brings us all the way back to where we started. It leaves us with a question that feels just as urgent today as it did back in Kafka's time. When does a person stop being a person and become just a problem to be solved?